What's good? What's good? What's popping on a Tuesday? Hope everyone's living it up. Beautiful weather here in Pittsburgh. A lot of hot topics to discuss. Former Steelers cornerback Steven Nelson put Pittsburgh Steelers on blast with how they handled his exit. Adam Schefter doubles down on the fact that he thinks the Steelers do have outside interest in an outside quarterback like Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. You know, we discussed some of those conflicting reports yesterday. And Diontae Johnson has more reactions to the so-called trade rumors. But before we get into that, wanted to go over some house cleaning on the channel, I guess you could say. You guys have noticed that the formats have been a little bit different over the last week and a half. Like the one episode of Big Deke News I recorded with this backdrop. And then some of the other Big Deke Newses, I've been using a little bit of a different editing style, but I've also been taking the Bleach Report live streams as I have been throughout the whole season and reposting them over here. So for this video, I'm actually trying to do the Bleach Report live stream type of thing, but I'm just doing it not live. This is just being recorded on my computer right now. Yeah, this year was cool because I was able to see if people would like that type of style, like a longer form piece of content, 30, 40 minutes of me just talking, interacting with the chat. And it seemed like you guys liked it, and I liked it. I really appreciate Bleach Report for giving me that opportunity to do it because I don't know if I would have taken that chance just on my own because Big Deke News, I really like doing that as well. So yeah, I just wanted to try out some different stuff and see how it goes. I think this is a good time for it, being the off-season March, although with content, the NFL really doesn't have an off-season. I'd consider their most downtime, it's probably like end of May, June, early July, because free agency is going to be happening next week, and then before you know it, it's going to be the draft, and then you got the schedule release at some point in May, OTAs, all that stuff. And then, yeah, June, July is probably the most dead time for the NFL. But it has really become, I think it's overtaken the NBA as like the 365-day-a-year sport where it's always in the news cycle. There's always something to talk about. So talking about something, let's get into this Steven Nelson video that was put. I think he's doing a podcast now. Former players, current players, like it is all the rage. Doing a podcast. So Steven Nelson said on his podcast, it's either his podcast or one of his teammates' podcasts he was on as a guest, he put the Steelers on blast. I guess the Steelers were brought up as a point of conversation, and he was not a fan with how things ended here.
I'm going to my last year, my cap number's high. You know what I'm saying? Okay. These motherfuckers felt the need to call me like during the offseason, like literally probably a day before fucking free agency on some shit like, hey, yo, and this Mike T. He called me on some shit like, hey, yo, Steve, I thinking upstairs they looking to trade you. I'm like, man, get the fuck out of here, man.
And what you mean you thinking? What do you know?
Yeah, like, you don't think you calling me because you know you heard something. You sitting around it, huh, like Mike T? Like, what's going on? Yeah. This a day before free agency. I didn't even like that because if y'all was thinking that, y'all should have gave me a chance to hit free agency on time. You know what a good laugh at is like, shit, ever since I left, the motherfuckers ain't found a corner yet. They still searching.
You know what I mean?
High and low, they searching.
Yeah, I'm not saying cutting Steven Nelson was the wisest move. I wish we could have kept him around. I always thought he was a good player for us. Hindsight 2020, you see that the decision was between him and Joe Hayden. We had to make a cut between them two. Both were, I think, hitting into the cap, like double digits. It was like 10+ million each. So one of them had to go. And we decided Steven Nelson was the guy to say sayonara to as opposed to Joe Hayden. But looking back, hindsight's 2020. Again, like, we only know what we know after it happens. It would have been a better call to keep Nelson around because he is still playing the game of football, whereas Joe Hayden has retired, and he's playing at a pretty high level. He's had good seasons at the different stops that he's had since leaving Pittsburgh with the Eagles and also the Texans. And I'll say it again. I thought Nelson was good for us. I wasn't pushing for us to get rid of him. It was just one of those business moves that had to be made to be under the cap space, or to be under the, be within the cap space regulations. But I thought for some reason fans knocked him a little bit too much, that they would get on him for some of the times that he got beat, but those were few and far between. I don't think he got torched that much. There was that one season in 2019 where I'd argue Nelson and Joe Hayden were both top 10 cornerbacks. Like, there were a lot of stats from Steven Nelson that were comparable to the defensive player of the year at the time, Stephon Gilmore. It's just that Nelson didn't have the interceptions and the pick sixes. That's all. But he was pretty locked down, and I thought Joe Hayden was too. That 2019 defense was pretty impressive just in general, but the secondary was a huge part of that, because that was something that we're not used to seeing, a secondary being, for the most part, locked down from week 1, week 2, all the way to the end of the season. Like, we haven't seen that from, I mean, even both of our cornerbacks. If you think about it, like Ike Taylor back in the day, like, he was that guy, but then you had like a Brian McFadden, Willie Gay. I don't think they were on an Ike Taylor type of level. We had two guys in Steven Nelson and Joe Hayden that were playing top 15, top 10 type of football at the cornerback position. Now, where I disagree with him here, or where I agree and disagree with him, like, I think he is right and wrong at the same time in his assessment here. He's right in that, yeah, we've been struggling in the secondary ever since we lost him. We've tried to do some patchwork things, like bring in Mykele Witherspoon, who he had his highs here in Pittsburgh, but he's also had some lows. Levi Wallace even tested out James Pierre at times, signed Pat P last year, who became a pretty solid utility player for us as the season went on. Like, let's not disrespect Pat P completely. Like, he was good for us last year, but I don't know if cornerback is going to be his calling card going forward if he were to stay here, and probably just if he were to continue playing in the NFL as opposed to retiring. But we also have had a couple good guys come through here. Cam Sutton, like, it's probably arguable between Sutton and Steven Nelson who is the better player. And then we just drafted JPJ. We all know JPJ is next up. Like, he's going to be a dog in this league for a long time. And maybe it's arguable who had the better season between Steven Nelson's peak season in 2019 versus JPJ in his rookie season. The only knock that you could say with JPJ is he didn't get enough snaps out there. That's all. That's probably why he wasn't more seriously in consideration for Defensive Rookie of the Year, because we eased him along. The probably like first 4 or 5 weeks, he was out there maybe 20%, 30% of the time. But after that bye, he became our bona fide starter, locking up dudes like DeAndre Hopkins and the rest of the team's wide receiver ones that we played throughout the season. So Nelson is right. We could have used him. I think essentially that's it. Like, if we were to have kept him, that would not have been a bad thing. I think we have struggled at the cornerback position more than necessary if we just would have kept Nelson. But we've had some guys here. Like, it's not like we've not been able to find dudes that can play and, you know, that we can hang our hat on. Cam Sutton, Joey Porter Jr. are good examples of that. But now let's get into Adam Schefter, because there have been these back and forth reports. First, it was Adam Schefter saying Steelers are looking at an outside quarterback like Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, et cetera, et cetera. And then you had the Athletic article that dropped yesterday that refuted the Schefter report. But then Schefter, shortly after the Athletic article dropped, went on the Pat McAfee show and reiterated his initial report. Have a listen.
Are the Steelers actively looking for a replacement for Kenny, for competition for Kenny? Do you have any idea what's going on as far as that and Fields and all of that?
They're looking. They're absolutely looking, and I would expect at some point they're going to add one of these guys. It doesn't feel like they are in an urgent mode to where, boy, we're going to go make this move for Kirk Cousins on day one of free agency and outspend all these guys. I think that they still absolutely have hopes for Kenny Pickett, which I think enters into the decision, the ultimate decision that they eventually make about whichever quarterback they do bring aboard. And so when you're talking about a guy like Justin Fields, who we all know that there are people in that organization that really like him, is it going to be worth whatever they have to give up for a guy like him to bring him in? Or do they prefer to go sign a free agent like Ryan Tannehill or Russell Wilson, where you don't have to compensate the other team? I don't think they know right now, and I think they're still sorting through it as we speak. But all these decisions are going to crystallize here over the course of the next week. And I do think they'll add a quarterback. I haven't sensed that they were at the combine, going through quarterback meetings like round the clock to go get somebody in here to dislodge Kenny Pickett. So I'm not giving you a specific answer because I don't think right now they have a specific answer. I think some of those names you mentioned are in play. Some are more likely than others. I don't expect Kirk Cousins to wind up in Pittsburgh. I do think that a guy like Russell Wilson or Justin Fields or Tannehill could be in play, and we'll see.
You guys know where I stand on this quarterback thing. I'm completely good with Kenny being QB1 in 2024. I think he's going to prove a lot of the haters and doubters wrong if given the opportunity. But since we are going to bring in some sort of competition, like that's just a straight up fact at this point. It's been said how many times from Tomlin, Rooney, and Omar Khan. If we were to do the competition stuff, I think Mason is the re-signing that you should make. I think doing Mason versus Kenny this offseason, completely 100% good with that. And that's the route that I would go. It is. But you got this Russell Wilson thing that's now in the fold here. It's official that the Broncos will be releasing him. That's a different story. That's a whole conversation in and of itself, because you're talking about bringing Russell Wilson in here, a Hall of Famer who isn't that over the hill just yet, on a vet minimum deal. Like, if the Steelers were to go that route, I can't really argue against it. He had 29 touchdowns last year in 15 games. He may not be prime Russell Wilson anymore, but that on a Steelers team last year, on a Steelers team for 2024, is probably doing some damage. It probably is, especially with that contract, because you could still build up the team around Russ. Like, he's not taking anything away from you. He's not taking your ability to add to the defense, to add an extra weapon or two on offense, to add to the offensive line. So if you just want to say, screw it, we want a proven guy in here, like a Russell Wilson, and we don't really got to pay him, I would understand that. I don't know how the Steelers feel about Russell Wilson behind the scenes. Do they think it will be a good culture fit? I don't know. But if they were to go that route, I would understand it. Is that what I'm calling for? No, I'm going to stick with my guy Pickett. I believe he could get to at least what Russell Wilson did last year. I believe he could do that. I believe he could be a solid starting quarterback in this league for us in 2024. And I think his ceiling's even higher than that. But I think he could be a top 15 guy at least next year. At least. But I get those of you that may be pushing back because there is uncertainty. I thought Pickett's second year obviously didn't go as planned. Clearly didn't go as planned. But he also had some injuries to deal with. He also had Matt Canada as his coordinator, the guy that we fired, and we saw what happened the game after we fired Matt Canada. Kenny Pickett, the offense looked completely different night and day. But then, again, he got hurt. Availability is important, and that's something that Kenny Pickett has struggled with in his first 2 years. But this Adam Schefter report, going back to that, I don't think he's saying really anything crazy here. I think it actually goes hand in hand with what I'm thinking. Steelers like Kenny Pickett. He's the only quarterback on the roster. Their first priority in terms of bringing another QB into the room would be re-signing Mason Rudolph. But if that doesn't happen, we do have to do our due diligence and look at outside options like a Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. So the fact that he even said that the Steelers are still open, but they weren't too concerned or being too aggressive at looking at outside quarterbacks during the combine tells me that, yeah, I think they are really looking at Mason, but they're also not closing the door on a Justin Fields or I guess even a Russell Wilson. That's the thing. If you're bringing in Russell Wilson, it's not a competition. It's not. Like, I feel like with how the Steelers handle Russell Wilson will be a sign to how they feel about Kenny Pickett. Because if they bring it, even if they bring in a Fields, that's still competition. If they bring back Mason, that's competition. Basically, any other quarterback that's been thrown around right now, that's competition. That goes to show, like, they're ready to roll with KP8 in 2024. Like, it'll still be, the back and forth throughout the offseason of reps, competition, Pickett, whoever else is there for QB2. But, like, if Kenny wins the job, they're completely fine with that. If they sign Russell Wilson, like, you're not signing Russell Wilson to be in a competition. That's just a fact. That's just a fact. Now, I'm going to take that as a positive. Like, let's say the Steelers pass on Russell Wilson. I'm going to take that as a positive and saying, like, all right, they really do believe in this guy they took in the first round in 2022. Most of you guys will take it as a negative and say the Steelers organization is stupid and they're stubborn and they're stuck in their ways and such a backwards organization, all of that. But yeah, I don't think what Schefter said here is anything crazy. It's just that you had the conflicting reports from him saying Steelers are open to an outside quarterback. They're having conversations about Fields, etc. But then you had The Athletic shut that down and just said they're not interested in any of these guys. But then Schefter comes back and say, all right, maybe they haven't pursued these guys that heavily, but there still is interest. Like, don't get it twisted. Now let's get into these Diontae trade rumors again. He had a couple more tweets that he thrown out there. We went over some of them yesterday, but since then he had more reactions. Calvin Ridley, he quote tweeted Calvin Ridley, where Ridley said, "Boys make these accounts and play GM." And Diontae throws up a couple exclamation mark emojis, seconding what Ridley had to say there. And then he also tweets out, "Y'all are delusional." Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Diontae doesn't want to be traded. Kaboli hinted that these trade rumors popping up could be due to Diontae being disgruntled and wanting out of Pittsburgh. But based off Diontae's tweets, I'm guessing he's not the source for any of this trade stuff. Now, could the rumors still be valid? Yeah, because on paper, it does still make sense to trade Diontae if the price is right. If you're able to get a first or second round pick for him, sure. And if you're going to trust an organization to replace a receiver, the Steelers are the organization to do so. It's happened how many times over the last 15, 20 years? That is a consistent thing with this team. We know how to scout talent at the receiver position, and we know how to replace talent whenever they leave. Just a fact. And if you could get a dude that we're not paying $18 million for and can replace Diontae's production at least like 80 to 85%, then it makes sense. And you'd be getting this guy on a rookie contract for the next year. I don't know, or the next 4 years. I don't know specifically when they'd be looking at receiver. Would it be a first rounder? Would it be a second rounder? But there are a lot of good ones in this draft. I don't think there's any question about that. We saw a bunch of their athleticism scores from the combine and the 40s that they were running. Yeah. I think they're saying there's about like 12 or 13 in the top 50. So maybe like 15 receivers could be drafted in these first two rounds, man. So some other teams aren't as successful with the wide receiver position and picking them out from the draft, but the Steelers do a pretty good job. I'm not pushing for a Diontae trade by any means. I think Diontae still has value, will always have value. I think he's just a damn good receiver, especially if you want to see what a guy like KP8's got or what a guy like Mason Rudolph's got for a full season next year. Like, I don't think you want to take a Diontae Johnson away. Like, he still has chemistry with those quarterbacks. Dating back to 2019, Diontae's rookie year, he was there for Mason. And then with KP8 over these last 2 years, I mean, there's some sort of rapport. Is it where we want it to be? No, but Diontae is one of those dudes that can get open, is very quarterback friendly, and is a former Pro Bowler. So you just don't want to get rid of him for nothing or just get rid of him to save money. You got to be getting some sort of value back, and that's the question. What's his market? In the past, we were saying second round. I don't know what it is now with him only having a year left on his contract. The team trading for him, are they going to have to give him an extension? But if they don't, do you want to be giving up anything of significance just for a 1 year rental? So there's a lot of different things at play. Anything worse than a second rounder, I don't want to give up. If it's a third rounder or higher, I'm good. Just bring Diontae back, and then we'll figure things out as they go. But, yeah, I think that's it for today's edition of whatever you want to call this, Talking Shop, talking some Steelers ball. But hope you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned. I'll probably do something like this tomorrow. And stay chilling. Peace.